Welcome to yet another episode of Game of Thrones Abridged on Alt Swift X. Today we are reading Eddard X. Eddard 10, the 10th Ned chapter, aka Nedception. Journey to the center of the Ned. Today we are entering Ned's mind. We are entering his brain in order to rifle through his memories, go through the photo album that is Ned's head, and dig through the memories that are at the core of Eddard's personality, the foundations, the defining moments which have dictated his behavior and his personality in so many ways in the decade and a bit that followed. This is some important shit we're getting into. And that important moment, that pivotal moment in Ned's life that we're going to explore is the Tower of Joy, the fight at the Tower of Joy and the events that transpired after. We've had all these hints throughout this book so far that Ned made promises to his sister Lyanna, who died in a bed of blood. We've had all this mystery surrounding those years of Robert's Rebellion. What happened with Rhaegar? What was the origin of Jon Snow? Well, now we begin to know some of those details by means of this dream that we're about to incept our way into in this chapter. So it begins with Ned dreaming an old dream. There are 3 knights in white cloaks, and there is a tower, and there is Lyanna in her bed of blood. So the knights with the white cloaks are the King's Guard, of course, and the tower is the Tower of Joy, but we'll get to that. So Ned is approaching with his 6 mates. He's got Martin Castle, Theo Wool, Ethan Glover, Mark Riswell, Lord Dustin, and Howland Reed. All these men came to the Tower of Joy with Ned. Ned's trusted mates who had fought with him in Robert's Rebellion and served with him as bannermen, and he'd brought his fucking top-notch A-grade crew. He's brought his A-team to the moment that matters most. And only 2 would survive these events. And the 7, Ned and his 6 mates, were facing 3 Kingsguard, who happened to be 3 of the most powerful fighters in Westeros at the time. Loyal to the king, Aerys, who was just being deposed by Robert Baratheon with Eddard's help. The 3 Kingsguard are Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, with his great sword, Dawn, which of course is supposedly forged out of a meteorite and has all this mystery surrounding it, mysticism and strange properties. And there's also Oswell Went, and there is Gerald Hightower, the White Bull, who is the Lord Commander of the King's Guard. So these upstanding, famous, powerful men are guarding the Tower of Joy, and what lies within, we don't really know, but well, spoiler, Lyanna Stark in her bed of blood is in this tower. And so we have this conversation between Ned and the men of the King's Guard, and Ned was like, hey, you weren't at the battle at the Trident. You were a fucking no-show. You said you'd come on the Facebook event, but you didn't turn up. What the fuck's up with that? And the King's Guard were like, well, look, if we were there, your mate Robert Baratheon wouldn't have won. And Ned's like, man, I was at King's Landing when Jaime Lannister killed your king, Aerys Targaryen. Why weren't you there? And the King's Guard were like, yeah, no, we weren't there. We were far away. And if we were there, King Aerys would still be in charge, but we weren't there. And then Ned's like, again, and then I went to Storm's End. I went to this castle and I broke the siege. And I thought you'd come. I thought you'd be there, but you didn't turn up. What the fuck's up with this tardiness, this absenteeism? Why aren't you coming? Why are you recalcitrant? Why are you not arriving where you're needed? And the King's Guard keeps saying, yeah. And then Ned again says, he says, William Darry went to Dragonstone with the Queen and with Prince Viserys, who at this point is like the last living blood of King Aerys Targaryen, the king who these Kingsguard are sworn to serve. And Ned's like, why weren't you there? Why aren't you helping them? And again, the Kingsguard are like, guess we had more important things to do. Which right away is like a, hold on moment. Why are these Kingsguard, these powerful men who are sworn by oath and duty and honor to protect the king and his kin, if they weren't at the battle and they weren't at Storm's End and they're not at Dragonstone and they're not doing all these important things that they should be doing, what the fuck are they doing in the Mountains of Dawn at this random tower in the middle of nowhere protecting Lyanna Stark? What possible justification could they have for being out here in the middle of nowhere when a battle for their king is raging on the other side of Westeros? What are they doing here? And the answer, of course, if R plus L equals J is true, is that they are here to guard the rightful king, the heir to the Targaryen dynasty that they swore to protect, Jon Snow, who's in the belly of Lyanna Stark, who Lyanna is just giving birth to. The Kingsguard are here to guard the heir to the kingdom, Jon Snow. A Targaryen king, son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. That is presumably why we have this whole conversation about, like, why weren't you doing all these things you should have been doing? It's because they had a greater duty to protect the son of the son of the king. The son of Rhaegar, the son Jon Snow. But then Arthur Dayne stands up and says, alright, enough talk. We're getting dangerously close to actually explaining what the fuck's going on in this book. It's a bit too early for that exposition, so I'm going to have to cut into this dialogue with a bit of combat. That's how we're going to solve this. And so Ned says... And so Arthur Dayne says, now it begins. Here's the good bit. Arthur Dayne skips through the dialogue and he wants to get... He's that guy who, like, when he plays like an RPG, he skips through all the text to get to the fighting bits, because Arthur Dayne is good at the fighting bits. He's probably supposedly the greatest fighter in Westeros at this time. And he says, now it begins, and then Ned says, with sadness in his voice, now it ends. Which is a good line. And then, well, they begin fighting. And he hears Lyanna screaming from the tower as she's giving birth to Jon Snow, the son of Rhaegar Targaryen. He hears his sister screaming as he's fighting these men. And in his fever dream, because of course we're in a fever dream right now, he hears himself saying, I promise, Leah, I promise, Lyanna, I promise. And then the dream sort of breaks down and the Inception walls start to sort of cave in and crumble, and then we sort of start to emerge out of the dream, and then suddenly Ned opens his eyes. So it's a tantalizing hint of certain truths, but we never really get detail. We never really. It's a taste. It's a tease. It's just a tiny little glimmer of the greater truths about Jon Snow's origins and all of that. But of course, it's so consequential for Ned, because the promise that he made to Lyanna and his regrets and his hopes and his fears about what that meant to him, and the sacrifices he had to make to protect Ned, and the loss of all of his friends, his 6 mates, except for Howland, like, all of that weighs very heavily on Ned for the whole book and for his whole life, even though that won't last much longer. So Ned wakes up, and he's got Veon Poole to wake him up, which wouldn't be my choice of of bed nurse, but if you have to take someone, I suppose Veon Poole will do. So Veon Poole's like, yeah, you've been out for like 6 days, mate. Like, you were fucked up. Like, you went hard. And Ned's like, man, I had a horse fall. Like, I wasn't like drunk. I had a horse. Remember, a horse fell on my leg. And Veon's like, sure, yeah, whatever, man. I know how hard you go in the paint, Ned. And Ned's like, fuck, all right. He doesn't say that. And Vaon's like, the king wants to talk to you. And Ned's like, the last fucking thing I want to do in the world is talk to the king right now. I am as weak as a kitten after the horse fell on my leg in the dream and all the shit that's happened to me. I don't want to talk to the king. And Vaon's like, you're going to have to come talk to the king. And so the king comes in. But first, Alan comes in, the guardsman Alan. And Ned asks about his daughters, Sansa and Arya. And apparently Sansa and Arya have been by Ned's bedside every day. Sansa has been praying quietly, but fierce Arya has been angry. Alan has never seen such anger in a girl. So Arya and Sansa are responding in very different ways to the turmoil that their family's going through right now. Sansa's being very sort of passive and conventional, while Arya's being very sort of angry and hateful and sort of starting to walk down that path of violence and isolation that defines her arc later. And Ned says, whatever happens, look after Arya and Sansa. You need to keep them safe no matter what. No matter what happens. So Ned is very protective of his daughters. Ned is overwhelmingly a protector. He's a protector of Jon, he's a protector of his children, he's a protector of his wife, he's a protector of the North. He doesn't do a very good job because he ends up getting his head chopped off, but Ned is one to take responsibility for things, basically. And then Ned reflects a little bit more about his dream. He thinks about how after his friends died, he had them buried, and he buried them under the stones of the Tower of Joys. The Great Tower, Ned demolished it after everything that happened there. And of course, we don't know everything that happened there, but we know that the fight happened there, and we know that Jon Snow's birth happened there. At least in the show, it's 100% confirmed. In the books, it's not 100% confirmed, but in the show, at least, it's 100% confirmed. And it's mentioned that Rhaegar named this tower the Tower of Joy, which suggests he had a really good time in that tower. We don't know the details, but it seems as though Rhaegar pretty much just shacked up with Lyanna in that tower and just basically fucked for about a year. I mean, the timeline's a little bit uncertain, but it looks as though Rhaegar and Lyanna eloped 10 leagues from the Lake of the God's Eye near Harrenhal. They got together and thought, hey, let's take a little holiday somewhere warm. So they went down to Dorne and they found a tower and thought, yeah, let's just hang up here. Rhaegar can play his harp, Lyanna can play with blue winter roses, and we can just fuck like rabbits and conceive Jon Snow. Seems as though they did that for a year in the Tower of Joy until, Rhaegar realized, oh, hold on a moment, there's a war for my father's kingdom going on outside. I'd better go and deal with that. And so he rides off to die at the end of Robert's Hammer, while Lyanna stays behind, guarded by the King's Guard to give birth to Jon Snow. That seems to be the order of events, but there is a lot of uncertainty. And Ned's like, yeah, and the only survivors of all that were Ned and Howland Reed, and of course little baby Jon Snow. And then we return back to the present, and Alan's like, all right, the King's coming in, and so is the Queen, and Ned's like, fuck, because the only person he would least like to deal with right now, other than the Queen, other than the King, is the Queen. And so they come inside, and Robert is a bit drunk. His face is already flushed with drink, and Cersei Lannister is looking upset, angry, like coldly, controlledly so, I think. And Ned decides to have a little drink as well, because when you're badly injured and you have just had a fever dream, the best thing to do is to drink up to fortify you. That's the smart thing to do. And basically, Cersei's really fucking mad about the fact that Catelyn has taken Tyrion Lannister, which she sees as a smirch on Lannister honor, and of course the fight outside the brothel with Jaime Lannister. Cersei's mad about that, and Ned immediately puts his hand up and says, my fault. He says, Catelyn is not responsible for the abduction of Tyrion Lannister. That was all me. She did that at my command, which is a lie. Ned did not command Catelyn to capture Tyrion Lannister, but Ned immediately takes the responsibility because Ned's instinct is to take responsibility and weight and blame. He carries burdens for other people. That's his instinct, which seems like this sort of selfless thing to do, but I think what happens in this book is that Ned weighs himself down with so much responsibility, nobly so, but he weighs himself down so much that he is crushed under it. And he dies. He's executed for crimes he didn't commit. You can't overdo altruism, because if you fuck yourself over, you can't help anybody else, can you? Ned overdoes it. So anyway, he says that he was responsible for the abduction of Tyrion, which he wasn't. And then Cersei sort of has Cersei gets right up in Ned's grill and goes like, all this crazy fucking shit that's happening, it's all Ned's fault, abduction of Tyrion and the fight outside the King's Road. And apparently the story that Cersei tells is that the fight outside the brothel, Cersei plays it as though Ned was like just coming out of the brothel to have a good time, and he was drunk and he started a fight with Jaime Lannister. That's how it's told, when in actual fact Ned was sober and he was at the brothel to investigate Barra, not to have a good time, and he came out and it was Jaime that attacked him. But of course Cersei is always twisting the truth to suit her narrative. And since she's the queen, she gets away with it. She gets away with it too. And so Ned tries to explain the truth, and he's like, no, I wasn't at the brothel to fuck around. I was at the brothel to visit your daughter, Robert. I was visiting Barra, the bastard daughter of Robert. And Robert's like, don't talk about my bastard kids in front of Cersei. She doesn't need to hear this shit. And of course, this is probably the moment when Cersei first finds out about Barra, and it's a couple of books later that Cersei has Barra and her mother brutally murdered. So yeah, Ned, it probably would have been better to not mention that in front of Cersei. Another strategic error by Ned. And Ned is still a bit sort of, he's not really at his strategic best. Not that his strategic best is all that good, but right now he's especially not at his strategic best because he's a bit woozy from the injuries and the painkillers and the wine and the fever dream, and there's a lot of shit meddling with Ned's head right now, so he's not at his best. And Ned makes another kind of ridiculously bad move, which is he declares again in front of Cersei, Robert, give me permission, and I'll go chase after Jaime Lannister, and I'll bring him back here to face justice. We'll go arrest another Lannister. That'll solve the problem. When of course it'll only surely provoke things further. Tywin won't be happy if both of his sons get abducted. Even though, of course, Jaime is responsible for having killed innocent men and such. And then Robert's like, no, fuck it. Robert says the pragmatic thing, which is, fuck it. Don't go after fucking Jaime right now. Let's just keep it chill, keep it calm, and not stir the pot any further. And then Ned's like, is that your notion of justice? He's like Tyrion in that last chapter. He's like, is this how justice is done in King's Landing? Justice is not done in King's Landing. Pragmatism prevails. And they just sort of bicker. Cersei's like, come on, Robert, you need to fucking mess up this Ned guy for fucking around with my brothers. Cersei argues that Jaime and Tyrion are your brothers, Robert, because by bond of marriage, they're your brothers-in-law. Isn't that a funny thought? Jaime and Tyrion being Robert's brothers-in-law. And Cersei's face is a study in contempt at how she looks at Robert. Cersei really hates Robert. Not only, hates him in terms of, how he's a bit of a dick and he's drunk and he's loud and he's insensitive to her, but she also hates him for his weakness and his ineptitude. Which I think is again related to maybe how Cersei hates aspects of herself in her own weakness. Cersei hates how she isn't able to assert herself, and so she also hates Robert for not being able to assert his self. And so Cersei's really getting up in Robert's grill now, and Robert turns around and hits her real hard in the face. That's after Cersei says, by rights, you ought to be in skirts and me in mail. So that sort of refers to Cersei's whole sort of gender gender frustrations as well. Cersei is someone who wants status and power and respect, but as a woman in a patriarchal society, she isn't able to get it. So she expresses a number of times in the series about how she wishes she were a man, so she could have the sorts of power and respect that people like her father Tywin get. And so Cersei chastises Robert on that, and Robert turns around and hits her. And Cersei says, in reference to the black eye that's forming on her face, she says, "I will wear this as a badge of honor." And Robert says, "Wear it in silence, or I'll honor you again." Which is such good dialogue. Such good dialogue. That's exactly the sort of dialogue that D&D seem incapable of writing for the recent seasons. I mean, not that enough shade is not already thrown at them, but, like, come on. Like, there are some really great lines in the books, and yet sometimes the best the show can muster are lines like Tyrion saying to Varys, "If I do something that stupid again, punch me in the face." And Bronn saying to the phrase, "If you weren't our friends, we'd be fucking you in the arse right now." That's dialogue? How much money are you spending on this show, and that's the best line you can come up with? Just dump that, wear it in silence or I'll honor you again. It's such good shit in the books. If only George Martin was writing the later seasons. But anyway, that's a hate train that no one benefits from riding. So Cersei leaves. Robert's just doled out some monarchical level domestic abuse. He king hit his queen, and Cersei leaves the room. And then Robert turns around to Ned and he says, "You see what she does to me?" So again, Robert's response is always to take no response. He's the opposite of Ned. Ned takes responsibility for everything, even the crimes of other people, but Robert refuses to take responsibility for anything, even his own crimes. He hits someone, and then he says that it's their fault, which, Cersei is a bit of a cunt, but Robert does not accept any responsibility for his own choices and behaviors, and that's why he's such a pathetic character, I think. But yeah, he also complains about how terrible Cersei is, which she is, and he sarcastically says, "My loving wife, the mother of my children." Except, of course, she's not the mother of any of his children. And in Ned's eyes, Robert sees something sad and scared. And Robert looks at his hands as if he does not know what they are. And Robert says, "How do you fight someone if you can't hit them?" Which is Robert's whole frustration, right? Because Robert is a warrior. All that Robert understands, all that Robert wants to understand, is a fight between goodies and baddies in which you win by hitting the bad guys harder than they hit you. That's why the moment on the Trident defeating Rhaegar Targaryen was the height of the pinnacle of his character. He was the hero who killed the baddie. But the realities that set in later, of politics and human relationships and governing, all of those things are more complex than just hitting things. And so someone like Robert Baratheon is totally incapable of handling those challenges, leaving him something sad and scared and someone who doesn't understand who he is anymore. And Robert thinks Rhaegar won. I killed Rhaegar, but he still won because he got Lyanna Stark, Ned's sister, who died. And so as Robert sees it, Rhaegar got to keep Lyanna while Robert was left with Cersei, who he loathes. So Ned and Robert are both having a pretty awful fucking time right now. And Ned's like, "All right, well, look, we've got to talk. We got to sort this shit out. You and me will work it out." But Robert, it's too much for him, and he says, "No, fuck it. I've had enough talking. I've had enough of this bullshit. I'm out of here. I'm going to start my own kingdom with hookers and blackjack. It's gonna be great." So Robert goes and leaves and does the only thing he understands, which is fighting things. He decides to go hunt a boar, and of course, this is what kills him. So Robert leaves, and then Ned's like, well, I'm going to leave too, remember? Because you told me to go back to Winterfell. You said I'm not your hand of the king anymore. And then Robert says, "Yeah, except you're Ned fucking Stark. You're the man who carries the burdens. And you know what? I'm not letting you return to Winterfell. I'm actually going to keep you as the Hand of the King. I'm going to keep you with all these responsibilities. I'm not letting you leave. You're here to stay, and indeed to die. So Robert and Ned sort of consign each other to death inadvertently. And so Ned says, yeah, he was being given no choice, which is always Ned's situation. He feels like he does not have the choice. He's being forced to do the honorable, responsible thing. When, of course, he could just leave anyway. It probably would be smarter at this point to gather up his daughters and run at this point. But Ned feels bound by responsibility and honor, and so he carries on his dutiful march into the jaws of death, as Ned does. And so Robert says, well, someone has to rule this damnable kingdom. Put on the badge of the Hand of the King, Ned. It suits you. And if you give it up again, then I'll give it to Jaime bloody Lannister. And then the chapter ends. So that was a short chapter, but an interesting chapter. We got our first proper look at the Tower of Joy, and we first started to get a glimpse of the truths lying behind these mysterious events of Lyanna's death and the birth of Jon Snow. And we also get these further insights into the characters of Ned and Robert, both men who are woefully inequipped to deal with the circumstances that they're in. Both basically good people, I think it would be argued, but both failures in terms of dealing with the situations they're in. Robert is too weak and too simple to be able to adapt to the difficult circumstances of politics and court life, and Ned is, well, perhaps just not smart enough to be able to, and also just not in a good situation. Ned doesn't have allies here at King's Landing. He doesn't have knowledge. He doesn't have a network. So he's overwhelmed by the challenges he faces, and he ends up killed. This is the changing of the guard. This is the old guard here, Robert and Ned, the dudes who are obsolete, and so they're dying off in this early book, and to be replaced by the new fresh faces like Jon Snow and Daenerys, who are the new rising generation who are able and who are more adaptable and who are going to sort shit out. Hopefully. Anyway. Thank you for listening.